Shalom. For the foremost, I give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai Ba'ashem, Wakakadash, and Heavenly Father. True name is Yahweh, and His only begotten Son, Ba'ashem, and name of Mashiach Yahushua. Those are the true names in the ancient Paleo Hebrew, Lashwan Kadash Lotam. And I say Barakatham to the elders and apostles, wa Akim wa Akwaf, and I say Shalom. And this is a sit-down lesson of this recent news article from CNN.com, published by David Goldman and John Tao Fahi from CNN, updated 4:51 p.m. Eastern Time, Friday, April the 4th, 2025. It reads, the Dow Jones plunged 2,200 points as the tariff tumult rocks markets. It says from the New York CNN, it says the U.S. stocks was battered by a step sell-off Friday after China retaliates against the United States for President Donald Trump's tariffs in a tiff attack that escalated a global trade war. The Dow Jones plunged 2,231 points, or 5.5%. The broader S&P 500 was 5.97% lower. The tech-heavy NASDAQ composite was 5.82% lower. It says the NASDAQ closed in a bear market for the first time since 2020. Since 2022, I meant to say. More than 20% from its record high in December. And it says Dow Jones closed in correction down more than 10% from its record highs in December. It's the first time the Dow Jones in correction since March 7, 2022, according to the Sam Stovall, chief of investment strategist, the CFRA research. The Dow Jones posts his biggest back-to-back losses since March of 2020, during the onset of the Word-19 demic. It says the S&P 500 sheds 5.6 trillion in market value across the past 2 days. It says, according to the Howard Silverblatt senior index analyst, the S&P 500 Dow Jones indicates the benchmark, which enters the corrections Thursday, sinking more than 10% over the past 2 days. Investors has been fearful of that a dramatic escalation of a trade war could plunge the U.S. and the global economies in a recession. The J.P. Morgan analyst said Thursday that the American economy and the broader world economy both has a 60% chance of sinking into a recession this year. The analyst also odds a recession would rise if country begins to retaliate against the United States. Was they going to do that? And China did so Friday. Retaliations raising the risk of further escalations. It could diminish hopes of negotiations. Markets may actually be underreacting, especially if these rates turn out to be the final, given the potential knock of the efforts of global consumption and trade, says Mark Burdett, head of the equities and the Stormberg Investment Management. The tariffs have injected a level of uncertainty and volatile we haven't seen since the early days of the pandemic. It says the U.S. stocks briefly rallied from the lowest point of the morning after Trump posts on social media that he has a very productive call with Tom Lam, the General Secretary of Communist Party of Vietnam. Lam told me that Vietnam wants to cut their tariffs down to zero if they are able to make an agreement with the United States. I thanked him on behalf of our country and said I look forward to meeting him in the near future, Trump said. The NKE, which slumped Thursday, rallied 3%. The NKE relies extensive on international supply chains and imports from Vietnam, where many of the factories are located. Yet stocks eventually slid back near their lows of the days as investors grapple with the intent of the Trump tariffs and the potential of a slowdown in economic growth. The Federal Reserve Jimmy Powell says during the prepared remarks Friday that inflation could remain elevated because of Trump's tariffs. It says that while uncertainty remains elevated, it is now becoming clear that the tariffs increasing will be significantly larger than expected. The same is likely to be true of the economy effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. And Powell, who spoke at an event just outside Washington, D.C., the size of the ratio of this effects remains uncertain. It said tariffs anxiety rose Wall Street. Investors Friday morning wrestled with tariff anxiety while also digesting a fresh data that shows stronger than expected job growth in March. The U.S. economy added 228,000 jobs in March, a significant increase from February revised gains on 117,000, according to the Bureau's labor statistics data released Friday. While job growth beef expectation tariff anguish continues to drive markets sentiment. Unfortunately, the market is no longer focusing on job markets and focusing squarely on tariffs and trade wars, and the U.S. plays chicken with the rest of the world, potentially beginning a downward spiral into a worldwide recession, says Chris Zach Clarkley, if I pronounce his name right, Chief Investment Officer at the Norlight Asset Management. Traders ditch risk stocks, especially tech companies whose products are manufactured overseas and could soon be subject to enormous tariffs. Apple, which tumbled more than 9% Thursday, was down another 7.3% Friday as the stock's futures tumbles ahead of the opening bell. It says Trump's post on social media to the many investors coming in the United States and investors massively amounts of money. My policy will never change. This is a great time to get richer than ever before. The Wall Street fears guards of the Colby Volatile Index, or VIX, surged 50%. Extremely feared was the settlements and driving markets, according to the CNN Fear and Greed Index, would slump to the lowest level this year as investors brace for an escalation of a trade war. As investor stocks, they pour money into traditional safe havens, including government bonds. The 10-year Treasury yield, which briefly fell below 4%, Thursday for the first time since October, fell formally below 4% as investors brought bonds to insulate themselves from a potential economic downturn. Bond prices and yield trades in opposite directions. So, since he mentioned those potential economic trade wars is going to continue further on as the markets react to that for the past 2 days, and the markets slash $5 trillion as the markets was down 2,200 points. This is the book of Saint Mark, chapter 3 and verse 24. As the markets affect with this trade wars, because at first I was reading that news article that was mostly they was mostly focusing on job reports, but the markets are not focusing on that no more. They're focusing on the increasing of these trade wars. So this is the book of Saint Mark, chapter 3, verse 24. And if a kingdom be divided against itself, the kingdom not stand. Right, so we're going to be seeing modern day kingdoms continue to divide within itself, even if it's on allies. That's what we're seeing with this latest of these economic trade wars that have been increasing. St. Mark chapter 3, verse 25. And if a house be divided against itself, the house cannot stand. And this is the book of Revelations 18 and verse 1. And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was like with his glory. Revelations 18 verse 2. And he cried mighty with a strong voice, saying, Babylon, the great is fallen, is fallen. Right, we see the signs of that mystic daughter Babylon is fallen because she become a habitation of demons and a hole of every foul spirit and a cage of every unclean HATEFUL bird. Revelations 18 verse 3, for all the nations have drunken wine and wrath for fornication, right, especially economical wise. And that's what we see in these economic tariffs of the United States doing on these countries. It says, for all the nations have drunken wine and wrath for fornication, right, still to this day. For all the nations had drunken wine and wrath for fornication, and the kings of the earth who had committed fornication for her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of your delicacies. And this is Jeremiah chapter 51. This is the book of Jeremiah, chapter 51, verse 7. It says, Babylon has been a golden cup in Yahweh's hand, right still to this day, and have made all the earth drunken, right, made all the earth drunken, the ways of Babylon, especially economical wise. It says the nations had drunk of wine, therefore the nations are mad, right, the nations are mad, rising up against her. Jeremiah 51, verse 8, Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed, how for her take bond for her pain, and so that she may be healed, right, so that's going to heal for Babylon. Jeremiah 51 verse 9, we would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsaken her, let us go everyone to his own country, for her judgment reached to heaven, slipped up to the skies. So with that, hopefully this sit down lesson was edifying of this recent news article as of April the 4th, 2025 from CNN. As it says again, the Dow Jones plunged 2,200 points as the tariff tumult rocks markets once again for the second time. For that, hopefully this lesson was edifying. And I would like to give all praises and glory and honor to Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai Bashem Kakadash, Barak Thumb, to the elders and apostles who Akim Akrof. Until next time, I will say Shalom.